We want to just bring you an update on the sex assault kit testing issue that has been discussed a lot over the last few years. And wanted to let you know that we, the Wichita Police Department, have been working in collaboration with our partners. That includes the Wichita Area Sexual Assault Center, KBI, Sedgwick County District Attorney's Office, and the Sedgwick County Regional Forensic Science Center regarding the testing of sexual assault and evidence kits. With me today is Lieutenant Stevens over Sex Assault BV and Kathy Williams with the Wichita Sex Assault Center. So really through these collaborative efforts, we're announcing today that the police department has committed to testing 100% of all the kits. And in order to achieve this goal, we have implemented operational plans that are going to get us there. You may recall that in 2017 we began working with the KBI, participating in the Sexual Assault Initiative Project, the SAKI project as it's often referred to. And as part of this, we sent 1,069 untested kits in early 2017 to the KBI lab. Well, these kits are still in the process of being tested, and the results are at various stages of completion. We, along with the District Attorney's Office, continue to review the test results on an ongoing basis. Additionally, an agreement has been reached with KBI to deliver the backlog of approximately 600 kits since 2015 to the KBI for testing. And the entire backlog is expected to be delivered before the end of this year. Moving forward, all kits will be delivered to a laboratory for testing on a continual basis. And we will continue to work diligently every day with our partners to investigate to the fullest extent these cases and make sure that we bring justice whenever possible. Really, this issue is about changing the culture around our response to sexual assault, sexual violence, and it is a true example of when our leaders from the criminal justice agencies and our advocacy agencies come together that we can make improvements and ultimately improve our response to victims. So this effort has righted a wrong, and while our well-intended past practices were just that, we operated with good intent, but we now look back and realize that it was not the best practice. So I really want to thank all those who worked at the ground level to make this happen. That includes Captain Brent Allred, Lieutenant Jason Stevens, Kathy Williams from the Wichita Sexual Assault Center, Kirk Thompson from the KBI, as well as Dr. Tim Rohrig from the Regional Forensic Science Center. But this plan ensures that the sex assault backlog kit will no longer have to be discussed in the future, as a solution has been made. So with that, happy to take a couple questions. We have our advocacy friends here and our leadership that's been working on this at the department. So,
Chief, can you talk about what you guys did as your practice before versus what the new practice will be, the big differences?
The past practice was there was a matrix that was put on these cases that looked at different elements of, for instance, was it a consensual argument? Were both parties, was the male half saying this was consensual and it was a he said, she said? Now we know the best practice is to test all the kits because often we've been, nationally other factors have been found where testing these kits, getting them in the national database leads to potentially other findings. You want to say anything on that as well?
Yeah, the chief's absolutely right, correct on that. I would elaborate a little further. The goal has always been to identify our offender in these cases. And as the chief said, sometimes in some of those cases, we already knew who the offender was, but there were other elements of the case that made it less viable to necessarily test the kit to because we'd already established who our offender was, but through some of the national studies and through the SAKI project, we've started to realize that there's a much greater benefit to testing every kit and having those profiles entered into the national FBI database. So hopefully we can link other crimes, and that extends even beyond sexual assaults. Some of these other crimes can include burglaries or other violent person crimes that have nothing to do with sex crimes, but it helps us link these cases and potentially identify serial offenders.
Have there been any cases that come to mind that since this new practice has been in play, that it has helped solve something else other than a sexual crime?
I'll say this. We began sending kits to the KBI as part of this project in the first part of 2017. And as the chief mentioned, we sent close to 1,100. Right now, those cases are in various stages of completion and testing. We don't get one test result back, and that's the end all. They kind of come in phases. And we've reviewed some cases, and to date, we have reopened a couple of cases that are being investigated further to determine if we can bring about criminal charges, but we haven't had a windfall yet. But like I said, we have a lot of future work to do on this.
And as an advocacy group, can you talk about, the impact? Could you go to the podium?
Of course you will.
The impact you believe this will have with the new practices and just clearing out this backlog?
I think it's another way to say to survivors, we believe you. We want to do everything we can in this investigation to get to the bottom of it and get justice. So I think it's a very affirming kind of thing for people who have been through such a horrific victimization to know that their efforts were for something, that their response to go to the hospital, have the evidence collected, that evidence really will be looked at, and when possible, charges will be filed. So I think it's a very affirming to survivors.
How long have some of these people been waiting?
I think Jason can answer that better than others, but for a long time, survivors have been told that, the kit was not done or they could not file charges, the law enforcement could not, for a variety of reasons. So this is just another piece in the puzzle to make it, to say, we believe you and we're going to do everything we can. So,
did you
Jason.
guys feel, we just talked about this past, the matrix cases, and now this new movement about testing all kits. How did you guys feel in the past versus how you feel now?
I know because of limited resources, decisions have to be made. For an advocate, the decisions are not always what we want to see happen. So I can just say I'm very pleased that we've moved into this direction and that the resources are there to support testing every kit.
So the 600, the backlog of 600 since 2015, could you explain that a little bit more? Is that is that on top of what had already been submitted, the 1,669 or however many?
Yeah, I'll just clarify that really quickly. The batch that we sent in 2017 as part of the SAKI project was anything prior to April 1 of 2015 that was in our possession at property and evidence. Anything past that date has been accumulated since then. And again, and we've said this before also, when we get these sexual assault evidence collection kits, there's a lot of different variable factors that are involved in it. It's not just the DNA. There's also documentation of injury. There's also a victim history or statement that's given to the forensic nurse that also goes towards helping through the investigation. And as the chief mentioned, our past practice was to, due to several factors, but resources obviously being one of those factors, was making tough decisions as to which ones that we needed to test. And a lot of that had to do with the case-by-case identification of suspects, and not necessarily as we're moving forward the bigger picture of linking crimes of this together. So back to your original question, though, the 600 are since the 2015.
And
Do you know the ones prior to 2015, how long ago were they, from April 1, 2015 to when was it?
They went back to 2002.
And can you, one more time, just for the folks that might not understand how sexual assault kits work, you know, last year, one of your sexual assault kits did help solve a case where you didn't know who the perpetrator was, and because of the sexual assault kit, you were able to identify that person. Can you just talk about the importance of these sexual assault kits, especially when you don't know the actual perpetrator?
Well, they are highly important. You know, everyone nowadays knows what DNA is and how DNA works. But when you get one of these kits, and I'm not a forensic nurse, but they do take DNA samples from various places on the victim's body to gather evidence of a transfer from our suspect. And with that evidence, and unfortunately we don't always get usable quality DNA profiles that can match with a suspect, but oftentimes we do. And when that's possible, and that suspect is already in the CODIS database, we are able to actually identify unknown offenders based on that. The other possibility, of course, is a lot of times, as you know, we do have known offenders, and we have to prove through some kind of evidentiary means that that is the person that committed the crime. And oftentimes we're able to get a known match from a known standard from our named suspect that we have in the case with scientific evidence. So it works both ways that way. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, just
Okay.
very important.
You mentioned
Yes.
before that these kits, you know, it's not all DNA. So when we're talking about like unsubmitted, are we talking about the full documentation of the injuries and photographs were not submitted also, or is it just the DNA part?
No, that's a good question. And we've talked about this before. Just the DNA portion is not, on those unsubmitted or untested as we term it. We hadn't tested the DNA portion of them. All of the kits are examined by an investigator. There's a lot of paperwork that comes with the kits. There's a lot of documentation that's done by the forensic nursing staff that documents charts and graphs and things where notations of injuries and locations of injuries and things of that nature that we can use to as evidence in a case to corroborate other facts to build a prosecutable case. So every kit historically has always been examined and evaluated by investigators. So it's
And that was done in collaboration too with the DAs, prosecutors as well, were part of that
yes,
matrix.